Revenge seeking is the number one motivation for almost all forms of human violence. That goes from bullies on playgrounds who are themselves feeling victimized all the way up through intimate partner violence, street and gang violence, violent extremism, terrorism, genocide, warfare. We have justice in the form of social justice, fairness, equity, love even. That's the kind of justice we associate with the greatest humans who have ever lived. People like Jesus or the Buddha or Martin Luther King. And then there's the version of justice that we use when we really mean revenge. It's engaged in punishing people for wrongs of the past. I found myself alone pretty late at night, and I heard a vehicle come to a stop in front of our house. There was a flash and an explosion, and then this same pickup truck that had been there a few weeks ago when the gunshot went off, that same pickup truck starts roaring away, leaving behind our mangled mailbox. I had never really confronted them in the past. I ran through the house. I grabbed a loaded revolver out of my dad's nightstand, jumped in my mother's car, and I went out through the night after these guys.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Change Your Minds podcast. My name is Owen Fitzpatrick, and today I'm going to be talking about revenge with the author of a fantastic book, The Science of Revenge, James Kimmel. James Kimmel Jr. is a violence researcher. He's a psychiatric professor, a lawyer, and an author who explores really the nuances and the details into why we feel the need for revenge. And he's startling new theory about revenge, which is going to turn everything you know about that topic on its head. To me, this is one of the books that I think everyone in the field of psychology should be reading, and pretty much most of the people in terms of public policy will also get a lot out of this. This can have huge ramifications to be able to tackle a lot of the violence that is happening in this world. So James, so good to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. Looking forward to it.
So to start off with, James, one of the most important things that got me sucked in at the beginning was your own story of revenge. Could you share with the listeners your experience right from the get-go, which I remember I was in your shoes as you were describing it, and I was thinking to myself, I'm 100% on his side. Whatever he decides to do, he's justified. Could you, and again, that's the word justified. Could you share with us what that first experience of revenge was like for you, or the desire for revenge?
Yeah, probably the most potent experience for me was when I was growing up. I was bullied pretty significantly in my school and in my community. My family had moved when I was 12 years old from a kind of a suburban neighborhood deep into the country, onto my great-grandfather's 200-acre farm. And this was a great opportunity for me. I was really excited about it. I had visited it many times as a kid growing up there. I thought it would be fantastic. My great-grandfather had a herd of black Angus cattle and some pigs, chickens and things like that. But we didn't make our living. He didn't make his living from the farm, nor did my folks. My dad was an insurance agent, as was my great-grandfather. And so when I got there as a 12-year-old, I wanted to befriend all of the farm kids around me. There were just vast, mega big dairy farms everywhere. A lot of kids there that I wanted to befriend, and I wanted really to become part of the farm community, and in my younger years really hoped to become a farmer myself. That was my career goal. So when I reached out to them to do that, I found, instead of a welcoming, hey, new kid on the block, let's go hang out, it was much more about, let's shun him and keep him out of our community. He's not one of us. And that was painful enough, but I wasn't going to be deterred by that. So I kept trying to earn their trust and their respect. But the more I did that, I think the more it aggravated them, and they moved on from shunning to bullying. And the bullying started, as it often does, with a lot of verbal insults and humiliation that way. But then it moved on into smaller acts of physical violence, pushing, shoving, kicking, punching, and things like that, getting on and off school buses in the hallways. But then it progressed one night in a much more unexpected and violent direction. My family and I were asleep deep at night, and we were awakened to the sound of a gunshot. And we, got up, raced to the windows to see what was happening outside. And I saw this pickup truck. So I'm about 16 or 17 years old at this point. I could drive. The guys that had been harassing and bullying me, they could drive. And so I saw this pickup truck outside that I knew was owned by one of those guys, taking off down the road after the gunshot. So we looked around the house to see if there was any damage and didn't see anything, no broken windows or anything like that. Figured that maybe they had just been out spotlighting deer, which is an illegal kind of poaching activity that people sometimes do. But we went back to bed. The next morning, one of my jobs before going to school was to take care of the animals that I just mentioned. And that included feeding and watering them, and also a dog that we had, a beautiful, sweet eagle named Paula that was it was a hunting dog. And when I went to her pen to feed and water her, I found her lying dead with a bullet hole in her head in a pool of blood.
To me, just at that moment, like I've been bullied in the past. I've had, when I was a teenager, I had, bullies put a knife to my throat, all that sort of stuff. But nothing comes remotely close to what that must have felt like. Like, I was enraged reading it. I can only imagine what you must have felt when you were experiencing it.
Yeah, I was very, very upset. My folks were upset. We were all upset. I have a brother. He was upset. And, so my folks called the police, and that's like the state police that cover, big areas, remote areas in Pennsylvania. They came, took a report, but they told us they were sorry that happened, but they weren't going to really do anything about it, unfortunately. And, they said if it escalates beyond there, and I mean, it's already pretty escalated at that point, but they said if it escalates more, please contact us and we'll get more involved. So about 3 weeks passed, 2 or 3 weeks, and I found myself alone pretty late at night. My folks were out somewhere. My brother was gone as well, so I was by myself. And I heard a vehicle come to a stop in front of our house, and we lived on this one-lane country road. So it was pretty unusual for, any kind of vehicle to stop there in the middle of this road. And so I got up to look outside to see what was happening. And as I was looking, as I was reaching the window, there was a flash and an explosion. And then this same pickup truck that had been there a few weeks ago when the gunshot went off, that same pickup truck starts roaring away, leaving behind our mangled mailbox. So they had blown up our mailbox with some sort of a M80 or a quarter stick of dynamite or something like that. But when they blew that up, that was kind of blowing up what was left of my reserves to continue to tolerate this. I had never really confronted them in the past. There was a big group of them. They were big guys. I'm not a huge guy like they are, and so I'd kind of just put up with a lot of the bullying, hoping it would just burn itself out. But it hadn't. So at that point, I ran through the house. Like I said, I was alone. I grabbed a loaded revolver out of my dad's nightstand. I had been shooting guns probably since I was 8 years old. We had lots of guns in our house for hunting, and he just kept this revolver in his nightstand for personal protection. And I grabbed it. I took off through the house, jumped in my mother's car, and I went out through the night after these guys. So I'm flying down this one-lane country road as fast as I can, just shouting and screaming in rage. And I eventually catch up to them, and I corner them near one of their barns. So I'm up on their property. They're in their pickup truck. I've got them cornered with my bright beams on, and I see 3 or 4 heads in the rear window of their truck. And they slowly get out, and they're squinting through, my high beams to try and figure out who had just come roaring down their drive. And a couple of things were clear to me at that point as they were getting out. One was they were unarmed in the sense that they didn't have any weapons in their hands. Maybe they did in the truck. No way for me to know. But the other thing that was clear to me is they couldn't have known that I had a gun. So it was a pretty good element of surprise situation for me. And so, I opened the door, grabbed the gun, and started to get out to confront them and and maybe go through with it and take them out, because I really wanted revenge for what they had done to me, or I wanted justice, which is another word we use when we really mean revenge. And as I was getting out with the gun, I just had this flash insight, kind of at the last second. At that point, I could kind of see into my future and realize that if I even survived what was about to occur, I'd be a different person the rest of my life. The guy who drove down that road would not at all be the same guy who drove back. I would have committed potentially an act of serious violence, causing a lot of hurt and pain to them, to myself, to their families, my family. And I knew I wasn't that guy. I was raised better than that. I wasn't a murderer. I wasn't a shooter. I didn't want to become one that night. So the cost of getting the revenge I wanted was more than I was willing to pay. And that quick insight was just enough for me to stop, put the gun back down, bring my leg back in the car, close the door and drive home.
Did you ever, after that, James, feel like, when I keep thinking about your dog, I keep getting the same feeling that's coming up. And again, we're going to get into the neuroscience of it. We're going to get into the anterior insula and the pain, and we're going to get into all that sort of stuff. But if I feel that resonating with me, and again, I'm only reading the story or hearing the story, for you, did it just what went on in your mind when it came to you thinking of them? When you came of thinking of them having taken your dog away, killed your dog, how did you stop yourself from doing any more after that point? Because that's that one moment in time. Let's imagine you go from anterior insula, from a brain noticing pain, to prefrontal cortex, where you're now starting to go, oh, hold on a second, the stop, as you call it, right? But what about but after that fact, for the next few days, weeks, months, knowing they're there, knowing they killed your dog, what was it that you had to do then that prevented you from exerting some form of, inverted commas, justice, revenge, whatever we want to say?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't think I've really been asked that before. What kept me, I guess, calm? And I think the decision there that I made, that it was clear that I didn't want to become this person, right, for the rest of my life, a killer. I guess, when I made that decision, it seemed almost irrevocable. It was sort of a, no, that's not what we're doing here. And we're not going to do that. Now, if I had been confronted by them, and it wasn't revenge seeking, but it was self-defense, I'm sure I could have been capable of doing anything, as we all are. There's a difference between punishing people for things they've done in the past, and I make this distinction clear in the book, and protecting ourselves from imminent threats of present or future harm. And so, I want to be clear, my fight or flight instinct was still fully intact, but I think it was clear to me that I wasn't going to go out and commit an act of violence in order to make myself, feel better, give myself this revenge gratification that I wanted. So that's the, kind of the best answer I can give you for that. No, again, this was a while ago too.
I was going to say, I think it's a great answer. I particularly like the fact that it was very much to do with your identity. Like the decision that you made, it's irrevocable because you're thinking, this is who I want to be, this is who I don't want to be. And as we know, our identity plays a huge part in determining how we filter the world and stuff. Another interesting thing I've heard you say, as well as seen you describe, is when we talk about, and you kind of alluded to it there a moment ago, revenge versus justice, and that there's two types of justice, which I love this distinction. Could you share the two types of justice? The one that we equate with revenge and the other one?
Yeah, happy to do that. And we're, humanity's grappling with this every day at the highest levels and at the lowest levels of our lives and our societies. But we have, we have justice in the form of social justice, fairness, equity, love even. And, it's the kind of justice we associate with, the greatest humans who have ever lived, people like Jesus or the Buddha or Gandhi, Martin Luther King, these types of people who are seeking fairness. Their lives were committed not to punishing people for the wrongs of the past, but simply changing systems and changing minds in order to bring about fairness and equity for either specific groups of people or individuals or for all people. So that's this kind of the holy version of justice, or the sanctified version of justice. And then there's this other Mr. Hyde version of justice, right? And this is the version of justice that we use when we really mean revenge. The criminal justice system is largely, the word justice in that is largely engaged not in fundamental fairness and equity. It's engaged in punishing people for wrongs of the past, right? And the clearest example I can give, and I give this in the book to make this distinction, is, after 9/11, when the terrorists attacked the United States, and, President Bush came out and said, we're going to bring the terrorists to justice. I assure the American people that's what's happening. And then he went on for, the first year or two of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, saying that we are showing the world and the terrorists what American justice means. He was not talking about fundamental fairness, equity, Jesus and Martin Luther King's justice. He was talking about killing terrorists and anybody near them or supporting them in order to get revenge or retribution for what they did on 9/11. That's the other form of justice. It just means revenge. And we use it this way because we're able to excuse and sanctify and bless, rationalize, promote, and engage in humanity's most vicious acts that we can think of. We know now from just endless public health data, behavioral studies, law enforcement data, and world history that, revenge seeking, that is trying to punish people because of wrongs that we think they've committed or hurts that they think they've committed, is the primary, number one motivation for almost all forms of human violence. That goes from bullies on playgrounds who are themselves feeling victimized first and seeking revenge against somebody directly or a proxy for that person, all the way up through intimate partner violence, street and gang violence, violent extremism, terrorism, genocide, warfare. All of these have at their root this sense of victimization, which is then in the mind sanctifying and blessing and becomes this go motivation for doing the same and worse to the people who wronged you or their proxies. That's the difference.
I think I love that explanation. I think a lot of people can very much relate. I mean, all you're going to do is turn on the news at the moment and you can see so much evidence of this. It would also make sense that the bullies, though, that bullied you initially, they were actually themselves finding some way, like their bullying of you was their own reaction against, because obviously there's going to be conformity and not wanting to be left out and being part of the group and, not want to look bad as teenagers or whatnot. But there's also going to be an element there of them being angry at society, being angry at you, being angry at anybody who doesn't fit in their, with their model of the world, if that makes sense.
I think that does make sense. And I think in that case, I never was able to speak to them and go, hey, what was the problem, guys? Why such hatred? Why going to this level? I was never able to ask that question, but my theory on that, and I think it's probably pretty close, because I did have throughout, my younger years, some of the things they said revealed something like this. My dad, my family, we were very different from the farm kids and their families. in socioeconomic ways, in the ways my dad earned his living. My dad, worked at, in an insurance office. He wore a suit, maybe rolled into his office around 9 or 10 a.m. Their dads were up at 5 a.m. My dad made a pretty good living, decent amount of money. Maybe we had some things that those guys didn't. Maybe they were hearing some things from their own families and their own parents about, who we are as a farm community versus people who are out in our out group. And we all do this all the time. There's the people in our in groups and the people in our out groups, and we're either suspicious of them or we're otherwise hating on them or jealous of them or just wanting to keep them away. And so it could have been that, and it might have been what we also see in terms of bullying research, where we find that almost always bullies feel themselves as victims first, not necessarily by the person who they're bullying. And I give an example of this. So what I'm talking about here is revenge by proxy. And a lot of people, I think historically, we've had this definition of revenge that's very narrowly focused on you're only able to get revenge if you target the person who committed the wrong, the perpetrator. But we now know that that's not at all the case, that we can target the perpetrator or a proxy for the perpetrator if targeting the perpetrator is too dangerous, or if they're not available, or it's not convenient to do for some reason. And an example of this is you have a bad day at work, your boss has maybe insulted you, or a coworker has insulted you, and you feel this sense, this grievance, this sense of victimization, humiliation, shame, pain, insult, betrayal, all these things. They all do the same thing inside your brain, which is create pain. And when you experience this, in that instance, retaliating against your boss or a coworker may be extremely dangerous. You might lose your job as a result. So you hold on to that anger and that desire for revenge. You get home and then you pick an unfair fight with an intimate partner, or is the classic thing is, you kick the dog or you punch the wall. These are ways of, we call that taking it out on the dog or the wall, but that's probably an inaccurate, or it's an inadequate description of what's really happening. You're getting revenge by proxy against the dog or the wall is what you're doing.
So just how would that line up with so one of the other things that I know that you mentioned in the book and your research suggests is that one of the places we get the most amount of satisfaction from revenge isn't just in the act itself. It's in making sure that the other person gets it, understands, knows it. That's an important element. Now, obviously, when you're, involved in the proxy side of this, there's a little bit of conflict there, because on the one hand, if you kick the dog doesn't know what's going on right in that context. So from that perspective, is it a case of you want people to know that you're angry about it, and therefore, how would you reconcile those two?
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. I think what happens is the best form, and I would say the most gratifying form of revenge, it seems from studies, is a form of revenge in which you're able to target the person who wronged you, that you are able to, in that instance, communicate, or they're well aware in some way, that the pain you're inflicting on them is because of the pain they inflicted on you, right? And then the last thing you'd like to have is that, so they know this, and also that they are expressing in some way that they're changed. They're not going to do it again. That's like the most gratifying form of revenge. There's an act at the end of it of either submission or supplication in terms of apology, and maybe commitment and explanation for why they're not going to want to do it again. But revenge is highly imperfect in a day-to-day world. And so sometimes when you can't get that form of what I'm just calling it perfect gratification revenge against a boss or a coworker, let's say, then you're willing to settle for less, because getting the maximum might cost you your job. So going and taking it out on an intimate partner or a dog makes sense because you're paying less price for the at least the primary form of gratification of revenge, which is hurting somebody or something because you felt victimized.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to go into a little bit of the neuroscience of this, right? But I want to, so a few years ago, I used to do this when I was working with different corporate groups. I do this exercise. It was based on a study, and you get people into groups of two and they flip a coin, and whoever wins, what they do is they get offered $100 and they can share it with the other person. Now, the whole game is that whatever they share with the other person, if the person says yes, they both get the money. And if a person says no, neither of them get the money. And so in this case, what I found fascinating, and this again lined up with the study that they did on this, was so often you would have people that would try to scam the system. So if I win the coin toss, I'm going to turn to James. I'm going to go, okay, James, I'll give you $1 out of this $100. Thinking that logically, if you were to make that logical decision, $1 is better than $0.
Yep.
But in most cases, it wasn't until I think it was, the chance to win, like, you would say no unless you got $30 or more from, and again, it's around about that figure. And to me, that fits beautifully with the notion of revenge, because it's almost like if you win the toss, okay, fine. But then if you only offer me $1, that's like an insult, or $10, that's like an insult. It's not fair, and I need justice. But instead of the justice being actual justice like the benevolent justice we talked about, it's the other form of justice. Well, if you're not going to play, if you're going to try to screw me over, I'm willing to take nothing either. From that perspective, could you sort of, first of all, do you think, is that an example sort of as a micro form of revenge from your point of view? And second of all, what is going on in the brain in situations like that?
It is a form of revenge there, and or it can become one. And as a matter of fact, it's great that you brought up that example, Owen, because some of the earlier studies, and maybe even more recent, but certainly some of the earliest studies on what's happening inside your brain when you feel a grievance and then given an opportunity to seek revenge are based on that game format, the very one that you just described. And they add to it a component, which is to say that you're given the opportunity to like you say, in effect, retaliate. But they add to it a component of, and if you do, everybody goes to zero. But you do too, so that you really do walk away with a cost for getting the revenge seeking that you want. And they found that even even if the consequence was bankrupting yourself, people will do that. Will literally bankrupt if they have a hoard of cash in one of those games. A stash of it. They started with both sides. Are given an amount of money, so they both had it. And it's like, I can pay all of my money for the opportunity to punish you for ripping me off in this game. I'll pay the whole thing. I will pay the entire amount, bankrupt myself for that revenge gratification. But then they do this while the players are in a brain scanner, in an fMRI machine. And when we watch what's going on inside the machine, here's what we see. So the first thing is that this always starts with a grievance, and a grievance is defined as a real or imagined, so it can be completely imaginary, and that's critical. But a real or imagined perception, just a perception, of having been wronged, treated unjustly, mistreated, humiliated, shamed, betrayed, all those types of largely psychological harms that register in the brain, it turns out, with just as much as impact as a physical harm, in the sense that there is a physical location for this. It's called the anterior insula. And so this form of real or imagined victimization, having a grievance, starts to activate the anterior insula, which is the brain's pain network. And when that occurs, the brain doesn't like pain, wants to rebalance itself with pleasure. And so we've evolved over time that we derive this enormous amount of pleasure from inflicting pain upon the people who wrong us or their proxies. This is a highly pleasurable event, and that registers, that the pleasure of that event registers, it turns out, rather chillingly, in the pleasure and reward circuitry of addiction, which is to say the nucleus accumbens and the dorsal striatum. These two areas of the brain are activating as well for things like, drug addiction, gambling addiction, other forms of addiction that we think of, behavioral addictions like food or sex or gaming addictions. And so when that circuitry activates, the circuitry floods with dopamine. So you're getting this very pleasurable dopamine hit that for a moment, for a short-lived period of time, makes you feel fantastic. It's euphoric. I've experienced it many times. Most of us have, but not all of us. There are people that tell me, I don't look for revenge. I don't crave it. I don't feel great doing it. And I don't really know what explains that. Those are anecdotal. In studies, it seems close to nearly everyone feels the gratification. And some people might be just saying, I don't really want to confess that I really feel good if I can get back at somebody who hurt me. But whatever the explanation is, neurologically, that's the setup. And then the last piece of the puzzle for addiction, for all addictions, is whether or not your prefrontal cortex, which is your executive function and decision-making circuitry and self-control circuitry, whether that's available and is going to control your behavior and stop you from gratifying something that's going to lead to negative consequences. And that if that area of the brain is inhibited or inactive for any reason, then there's nothing between you and gratifying this intensely powerful craving to retaliate. And that can lead to incredibly bad decisions that harm yourself and others. And we define addiction generally, the commonest definition is the inability to resist a desire to do something or ingest something like a substance, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, despite the negative consequences of doing it, the known negative consequences of doing it. And revenge has almost only all negative consequences. And so if we start to indulging these cravings and acting on them in ways that trigger these negative consequences, and that becomes habitual, and we can see that it does, then it does appear that revenge is an addictive process similar to those other ones I just described.
That's a great explanation. I just want to dive a bit more into this because I'm really find this whole area fascinating. So from my understanding, first of all, there's the concept called affective realism, coined by Lisa Feldman Barrett, which is the way in which you see the world is filtered through your feelings. And to me, this is a beautiful description of what goes on when you're in, let's inverted commas, imagine the revenge zone, right? You're in that state where all you can see is revenge. Your interior insula is saying, you were aggrieved here, your nucleus accumbens is firing up, sending the signals down so that you are feeling, I need to do something here. So it's not just the reward that you get, it's the craving that you get for the reward, the craving to get revenge, that desire, and that pushes you towards it. And to your point, the prefrontal cortex, which is, the sort of the planner or logical side, specifically there's two areas that I wanted to get your perspective on. So you've got the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and you've got the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. And my understanding is that the ventrolateral is more of like the almost like the inhibition, part of the brain. And then the dorsolateral perspective or prefrontal cortex is responsible for rationalizing and reasoning and coming up with logical evidence as to what's going on. How and when do they get involved, specifically when you either A, that moment you're getting out of the car, you stop, you change your mind, or B, when you embrace, as we'll get into a little later, the notion of the neuroscience of forgiveness, right? How are those two involved? Because obviously they're big players. How do they get involved, and how do they reduce? I suppose you're still going to have the feeling of being aggrieved. That starts the whole, but that's the inciting incident. That starts the whole process. You're still going to have initially the nucleus accumbens and the ventral striatum. You're still going to have that kind of drive for action. How does those parts of the prefrontal cortex specifically, how does that then influence the first piece to start to change the trajectory so that, let's say, that dopamine firing is no longer the same level as it was?
Yeah, I don't think that we know at a fully granular level the interaction between those two areas, the dorsal and the ventral. It's clear that the ventral activates as a brake, right? And as you described. And so one way that I think about is the dorsal lateral that you're talking about in terms of decision-making and cost-benefit analysis is working hand in hand with the ventral, which is the brake on your behavior, such that as you weigh cost benefits and make the decision, if it becomes clear, don't go, right? Stop, do not proceed. That then the ventral is activated. But that's just my supposition right here on the spot. I don't think that studies have shown, and particularly I haven't seen for revenge, that being parsed out at enough of a level for me to say categorically anything. And I want to also focus or emphasize, I am not a neuroscientist by training. I'm a lawyer by training. I work with neuroscientists, but so I don't have the decisive answer for that.
But there is some reason why the method that you have established and stuff works, right? So I suppose what I'm trying to understand is, what is it that happens in the brain when let's say the neuroscience of forgiveness goes in a different direction? Like, how have you a theory as to how that works, like how you were able to get people where normally they go from A to B and now they're going from A to C through the process that, the courtroom of your mind or whatnot? Have you a theory as to
I have some theories, and there are some theories about it, but it is just a theory. It hasn't been what we haven't been able to do yet, because there hasn't been, and setting aside what's going on with federal funding of research in general now, but even before the current administration, going backward in time, there hasn't been much of a willingness of the government to fund studies in this area, which is kind of shocking because it's so important to our, social health, welfare, and safety. But it's also, this is all very new. All of the neuroscience research we're talking about here is within the last 20 years. I mean, science has kind of ignored revenge seeking as something that was worth studying from 20 years ago all the way back to zero. So it is very new, and I get that. And I'm hoping that there will now be more research funding directed at this. But in terms of theory, I think you're talking about this non-justice system and miracle court approach. And I don't know if we want to describe what that is.
That would be great.
Yeah. So this is a good opportunity to do that. So, and maybe we should start with what's happening in your brain when you forgive. So I just described the three things that are happening inside your brain when you feel wronged or victimized. You get this activation of the pain network, then you get this activation of the pleasure and reward circuitry, and then the only thing that is last that needs to occur, hopefully will occur, is this activation of the prefrontal cortex to stop you from doing harmful things. Here's what happens if you forgive. So what I want to emphasize here is that when I talk about forgiveness, I'm talking about kind of neuroscience level forgiveness and what happens inside your brain. And it turns out that it doesn't necessarily have any connection to spirituality. It has spiritual benefits if those are meaningful for you. I believe it has spiritual benefits. It is meaningful for me, but I'm also aware I want to focus on just the neuroscience of it for a second. So here's what occurs. If you simply imagine, if you could just pick one right now, if it's safe for you to kind of anywhere to close your eyes and imagine a grievance that you might have that you just haven't been able to get over. You're still living with it. This might be something that happened days, months, years, decades ago, all the way back to your childhood. But you pick it up, should pop into your head almost immediately as soon as I say it. And now if you just imagine what it would feel like to forget, you don't have to forget it. You just imagine what it might feel like if you chose to forget. Most people in that instance will pretty quickly go, oh, okay, well, how would I feel if I forgave this? I would probably feel, I guess I'd feel some relief. I'd feel like this weight leaving my shoulders. And at the neuroscience level, here's what happens. By just imagining forgiveness, the first thing it does is it shuts down that anterior insula pain network. So forgiveness actually takes away and stops pain versus revenge fantasies, which give you a dopamine hit, or revenge seeking, which gives you this temporary dopamine hit that covers up the pain. The pain always comes back. You know, the dopamine hit only lasts a short period of time, and then you're left feeling worse, but wanting more. But with forgiveness, what seems to happen is that that anterior insula deactivates, so it becomes silent. The second thing that it does is that it shuts down the pleasure and reward circuitry of addiction. So it shuts down the nucleus accumbens and the dorsal striatum. So you're no longer experiencing craving and this motivation to go and get revenge, or plotting it out and fantasizing about it. All those things it's sort of itch scratching. You know, it's like it stimulates an itch, and then it stimulates you to want to think about it more, and it stimulates you to plot ways to scratch it. It shuts down that circuitry. And then the last thing simply imagining forgiveness does is it activates your prefrontal cortex, that self-control and executive function circuitry. So you get these three amazing benefits inside your brain for free, without a prescription, without a visit to the doctor. You're hardwired to do it just as much as you're hardwired to seek revenge when you're wronged. You're also hardwired to be able to heal yourself by practicing forgiveness. And it is a practice. When you imagine it, you feel better, and you might go with that for a little bit. And then if the pain comes back, you can just do that again, and you can imagine forgiving it again. And within a few tries of this, you'll start to realize that, wow, oh my gosh, I may have actually forgiven this thing, and I feel better, and I can move on with my life and stop letting the wrongs of the past interfere with and infect and ruin my present and my future. And you'll have longer and more extended periods of time in which you don't feel the pain and the need to retaliate against the person. And anytime it comes back, you can just do that. You can just do that again. So to go back, and I'll stop for a second, but we'll come back now to this miracle court non-justice system and what happens there.
Yeah, just before we get to that, when you say forgiveness, James, what does that look like in terms of what are the kinds of things you are saying to yourself inside of the word to forgive? If I say I'm going to forgive someone, I'm imagining it, I'm just not 100% clear, because obviously forgiveness has been sort of hijacked, sort of has become a sort of a religious term, and it's almost like there's a million different ways to interpret it. So from your perspective, when you say to forgive, what are the kinds of elements of the verb forgiving?
Yeah, psychologists who study forgiveness and have even created some forgiveness interventions have identified two types of forgiveness that I'll call at the psychological level, psychological forgiveness. The first one is they've defined as decisional forgiveness. And that's the one that I'm talking about here. It is a decision to forgive, which is to say to no longer seek revenge or even want revenge, which is to say to punish someone for something they've done to you or someone in your group or someone that you care about. So it's a decision to stop wanting, seeking, fantasizing about punishing that person. Just a decision. That decision can be made. It's really important to think about this, Owen, internally for yourself. It doesn't have to be something that you tell anyone about, including, most importantly, the person who wronged you. It's a decision of self-healing that is completely internal to you. So it's not a gift to the person who wronged you. It's not an act of pardon or dispensation to them. It's never saying what you did to me was okay. because it probably wasn't okay. And you don't need to tell them that it was. Forgiveness doesn't require that you believe that. I mean, if you get punched in the face, that's not okay, right? And to forgive, you don't have to make a role reversing, or I would just say reality reversing maneuver inside your head in which getting punched in the face is okay, and I'm going to become a victim now the rest of my life. That's not what forgiveness is about. Forgiveness is simply about deciding not to continue to seek, ruminate on, and become occupied by plotting somebody's punishment and plotting getting revenge against them. So the focus is on you and what you're doing inside your head. It's not on blessing what they've done or giving them a gift. That's decisional forgiveness. The other type of forgiveness is emotional forgiveness. And that's a little closer to rewiring your brain, but it does it in this way. It's a decision, and it involves all of the brain's empathy centers and some of your memory centers. And what happens in emotional forgiveness, which is sort of an advanced next level step, if you want to take it and can take it, but you don't have to. In emotional forgiveness, sometimes you'll develop a new way of looking at what happened in the first place. And you might go, oh, maybe I played a role in that bigger than I imagined. Maybe there was something going on in their life that now that I know about, or I can even imagine, but you might have got new information that you go, wow, I guess if that would have happened to me, maybe I would have in the same situation done it. But you come around to a new understanding of the conflict, the wrong, that person's culpability, maybe your own culpability in some sense, and it's a much bigger and broader emotional experience. And it might in the end lead to you deciding that that getting punched in the face, there might have been a rational reason or an excuse for that I can overlook. That's why I call it a more advanced level of forgiving, and it's not the same as this immediate benefits of decisional forgiveness that you can get like right now without going through all of that work.
And so does emotional forgiveness come from then your courtroom?
It could. So let's talk about the courtroom a little bit. So there's a courtroom, I talk in the book about this courtroom of the mind, in which we all go through, and this is something that I derived from being a lawyer. It's also something I derived from Sigmund Freud back, maybe 100 years ago, whenever it was that he said this. He said, we're all individually going about our days hourly, hour by hour, doing away with the people who insult us and wrong us. I mean, we're literally thinking about, he believed in our subconscious, we're literally killing all the people who victimize us inside our heads. And usually that stays inside your heads, and stays inside our heads. But what we are doing, it seems to me, is we are endlessly putting on trial the people who we perceive to have wronged or mistreated us. And when we do this, these courtrooms inside our minds, for some people, these courtrooms are busier than others. And when we do it, we play all the roles. We're the judge and jury. We decide guilt and innocence. We imagine a punishment. And then we have to decide at the end whether we're going to carry that punishment out in the real world. We're also the defendant, and we're the victim. So to help people forgive in a more authentic way that makes it more pleasurable, I created this idea, this process called the Nonjustice System, and it's now available in an app called the Miracle Court app. It's available at miraclecourt.com. And it's this, it's a virtual trial where you can put on trial anyone who's ever wronged you in your life. But during this trial, so you don't have to go hire a lawyer and go to a real courtroom with, a judge and, brick and mortar and all of that stuff, and a jury and other lawyers. Courtrooms can actually happen inside your head very fast. You in this non-justice system that I've created, and non-justice means abstaining from seeking justice in the form of revenge rather than seeking it. So it's not injustice, it's non-justice. But in this courtroom, you play the victim first and you testify to what happened to you. Then you play the defendant, and in playing of the role of defendant, you imagine what the defendant would say in their own defense. You might think that they admit to the crime, they deny it, they lie through their teeth. It can be anything you want. Then you're the jury deciding guilt or innocence. You're the judge handing down a punishment, and the punishment can be anything you want, not only something that a traditional court could do. And then you're the warden, and you have to imagine administering the punishment and inflicting that punishment upon the person who wronged you. But then in the last step, there's a fifth step. That everything I just said to this point is a normal criminal trial. But in the last step, the fifth step, called the final judgment, you become the judge of your own life, and you decide whether getting justice in the form of revenge is helping your life or hurting your life. Most people find that it's never helping their life. It's only causing them to be attached to the wrongs of the past and screwing up their present and their future. And it gives them the opportunity to imagine what that decisional forgiveness that I just described would feel like, and decide whether they really want revenge still, or justice in the form of revenge, or whether they'd like to just stick with that feeling of decisional forgiveness and move on with it. And in answer to your question about what I think is happening inside the brain, when people go through this, and we've studied this at Yale, and we found that revenge desires plummet, and that benevolence toward the wrongdoer, the perpetrator of what happened to you, those increase when you use this system. And I think that happens in a lot of ways. One is that trauma psychologists have explained many times that one of the most important things that victims of any form of trauma need is they need the opportunity to be heard, and they want accountability. The Nonjustice System Courtroom gives you the opportunity to be heard. So it's getting trauma victims the opportunity to finally be heard. And you can do it in this safe way where you control everything. You don't even have to confront the person who wronged you, but you can be heard. And that, you might go, well, you're only being heard inside your head. And that's not very significant. But I got to tell you, it's extremely significant, because the pain that you're feeling as a result of your trauma and the memories that you have of that traumatic event are all also only inside your head. A courtroom inside your head is actually putting a courtroom where you really need it, because everything, the pain, the memories, the desire for revenge, they're only in your head. They're not out here in the world of senses, taste, touch, smell, and things like that. You can't experience any of that stuff. It's in your head. So it gives you the opportunity to be heard. Then it gives you this ability to hold somebody accountable. You're holding the person who wronged you accountable. Accountable doesn't mean revenge. Accountability shouldn't be. It's often used also as a synonym for revenge. If I hold you accountable, it means you're found guilty and I punished you. But it really just means finding you responsible for what happened. It doesn't mean or necessitate a punishment. So it gives you accountability. It gives you this opportunity to be heard. And then the last thing it gives you in that when you play the warden who's punishing the person who wronged you is it gratifies your desire for revenge in a safe place inside your imagination. And I refer to this as methadone for a revenge addict. It gives you this safer release. And once that desire for revenge is out of your way, then you can start to think about decisional forgiveness, this idea of what might it feel like if I forgave. It creates space for that to be explored because you're no longer desiring revenge.
First of all, I love that technique. To me, it's like a really advanced form of, when you write a letter to someone that you're really angry with, and you're effectively like getting your revenge out, but through the page, and then you might burn the letter or just delete it or whatever.
Yeah.
The second thing that occurs to me is, with this particular technique, to me, I spend a lot of time talking about the stories that we sell to ourselves, but become the beliefs that we buy into. So we effectively change the stories. And to me, the courtroom of the mind is it's a powerful way of transforming the story you're telling yourself about the experience in such a way that not only gives you the relief, but also changes who you are and how you see the entire interaction. So in the default mode network, for example, you're fundamentally shifting or changing that. And that would also suggest why mindfulness, you mentioned in the book, is helpful, why cognitive restructuring is useful and reframing is useful from that perspective. So I love the courtroom. I think it's a wonderful description. I've got one more question and I'm a quick fire round, if that's okay, James.
Sure.
The final question is, so if you watch Inglourious Bastards by Quentin Tarantino, or any a movie where you have lots of Nazis being murdered brutally. I don't know about you, like for me, I find myself laughing and enjoying that. And that's pure, revenge killing, there's nothing else for it. So I'm aware of that. Now, in my personal life, I'm pretty good in that. I feel that almost like I was brought up, like I think I have a bit of guilt that stops me from seeking revenge as much. I don't want people, I'm angry with people, but I don't necessarily want them to suffer, because if I think about that, I feel bad. So it's kind of like not a healthy way of dealing with it. But when I watch the Nazis, I'm like, yes. Now in your book, one of my favorite chapters was when you talked about Hitler and Stalin and Mao, and how that the ridiculous amount of people that are dead as a direct result of revenge. Could you talk a little bit about, this is such a huge issue currently today, like there's certain people in the world now that aren't affecting me personally, but are making certain decisions that I do sometimes get tempted by a state of revenge. Like I want them to suffer because of what they're doing to so many people. Like, could you talk a little bit about that in society and what needs to happen? Because as you pointed out, revenge is not like, just an emotional state. It's an addiction, which I think is a great word for it. And I think it's a brave word for it, but I think it's a powerful word. Could you talk a little bit about the overall criticality of recognizing revenge as an addiction and moving forward, because it has consequences not just on, everyday people are getting bullied, but it has consequences on world leaders and wars.
It does, and I think that forms. It's not just first of all, revenge addiction is a human problem, and it's not one political group's problem. It's not a conservative problem. It's not a liberal problem. Both conservatives and liberals are revenge seekers and sometimes revenge addicts. So it's a deeply human problem, and it's an ancient human problem. Like I said, it's something that revenge desires have evolved. It's believed from, the Ice Age and earlier. The other thing to think about in terms of the present state of affairs is humanity's incredible vulnerability to social networking platforms that we didn't expect and we weren't adapted to deal with at all, and they just suddenly plopped onto our computer screens and onto our cell phones. And the reason that social networking platforms are so dangerous is that they are uniquely tailored to allow us to spread grievances to millions of people at light speed, like all at once. It's very easy to spread the sense of victimization to one, and then millions of people, groups of people, in groups, out groups. So people who are victims can share their victimization, and we are all empathetic. Humans have powerful empathy centers. We can empathize with the pain of other people. And so social networking platforms are very good at grievance. What I would say is kind of infection. It's almost pandemic level experiences on a daily, hourly, maybe minute by minute basis, in which people are exhaling through their computers. It's kind of like COVID, but instead it's, through taps on a screen, their pain and their victimization, which then is victimizing other people. At the same time, social networking platforms also give you an instantaneous opportunity to gratify your revenge desires, like bang, immediately. I feel hurt. I'm going to type out a mean, a retaliatory tweet, either directly at the person who wronged me or on a platform in which we all can do it. And I encourage millions of people now to retaliate using the platform. I can also use social media platforms to create real world revenge-seeking experiences and plot and plan them. And I think about that in terms of the January 6th insurrection, in which first we had, and you and I talked earlier, Owen, about even an imagined grievance can become truly definite. The imagined grievance of an election being stolen, said enough times to millions of people, can create victimization everywhere. That's a huge grievance to steal an election. I mean, if that really happened, in that case, the Republicans would absolutely have a reason to complain. That's a horrific thing to do. It didn't happen, but a lot of people believed it. having that grievance experience, they started sharing their grievances, their desire for revenge. Other people joined on, and they infected a large group of people, and then used the platform to plot an attack at the Capitol in which actual people were killed. So it moved from the virtual world into the real world, and it's had dangerous consequences. Now, if you have leaders, and we have right now kind of administration that's very committed to revenge seeking in every way possible. And it has, appointed avengers, essentially, superhero avengers in almost every department in the government. And they're all kind of committed to, revenge seeking and grievance spreading. This can now affect the entire country and even the world. We use tariffs or revenge seeking and all of the other things, withdrawing aid just to retaliate, revenge seeking. So we have a lot of revenge seeking going on. My answer to all of this is the same answer that we talked about earlier. It is, if you wanted to really make America great again, you would start by making America forgiving again. And that's what we really need right now is talking more about forgiveness at the highest levels of government, forgiving, our opponents who might be political opponents, forgiving people in our homes and in our schools and our communities, and doing that a lot more. And you might go, oh, wow, that's a Pollyanna-ish, silly thing. Nobody forgives anything, but it's not true. I talk about many examples in the book. And there are many examples of national scale forgiveness. Even after World War II, talking about the Nazis, as much as we enjoy watching the Nazis in a movie like Inglourious Bastards being killed and tortured and pain just being inflicted on them for the horrific things they did. Despite all of that, we are now at complete peace, and we have allies with the two greatest villains in, I think, world history. Germany and Japan are now American allies, even though we had to go to war with them. How could they be allies? Think about that. They didn't become allies because we subdued them with the nuclear bomb. They became allies because we forgave them at national scale and they forgave us. That is why only forgiveness can hold the peace. And that's what I believe we need now to make America forgiving again.
I think that's a really great response. I loved in particular, you talked about Truman as being one of the catalysts for that, but also you pointed out the difference between the end of World War I and the aggression, the anger at Treaty of Versailles, for example, and Hitler using that as an opportunity to be able to spread the kind of stuff that he spread and stuff. So I think that's very, very powerful. And I really hope that more people can hear what you have to say, James. Lastly, I have a real quick fire round questions. Favorite movie?
Oh man, favorite movie. Jeez, I wish you wouldn't have asked that because I'm not a big movie watcher. I'll tell you, Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins, love it. A favorite author?
John Steinbeck.
Favorite book?
East of Eden.
Favorite artist?
Paul Cézanne.
Favorite musician?
I'm going to have to say, sorry that I'm delaying. I'm trying to think of my favorite. Right now, it's Rimsky-Korsakov.
Fantastic. Favorite philosopher?
I'm gonna. I don't know if this is a fair thing, but I would say Jesus is both my favorite philosopher and spiritual teacher.
That works. Favorite TV series?
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld. If you could have any superpower, what would you have?
I already have it. It's forgiveness. And all I want to do is use it more and more and more.
Love it. Just 2 or 3 more. Ideal time travel, if you could travel anywhere, past, present, or future.
Oh, wow. That's very cool. I'm sorry this is going to diverge into religious, but yeah, that'd be pretty cool to go back and actually see and hear what Jesus actually said. That'd be something.
Fantastic. If you could live anywhere besides where you live, where would it be?
Tuscany.
And last but not least, one piece of advice. I think I know what it is.
Yeah.
One piece of advice for the world if it was on a billboard.
Make the world forgiving again. That's my advice. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Make yourself forgiving again. You'll enjoy it. Your life will be a lot better fast.
Fantastic. I love that. And look, I think one of the most important things for people to take away as well is the fact that it's easy to turn around and see everyone else being revenge addicts, but we have to look at ourselves as well. It's like you said, it's on both sides of the aisle. It's on everywhere. So we need to first take ownership. But I absolutely love chatting with you, James. I could do it for a lot time more. And best of luck with your book. For anybody who's interested, I highly recommend get the book, The Science of Revenge. It's an excellent book. It really goes in. It's very enjoyable, and it will have you getting angry through it when you're in that zone, but then you'll be able to go through the courtroom of the mind, and that will calm you down as well. Also, check out miraclecourt.com and the Miracle Court app. As well, as that sounds like a game changer as well. But a big thank you, James, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you. Fantastic interview. And my personal website is www.jameskimmeljr.com, so you can check me out there as well.
Perfect. I'm going to put all that in the show notes for now, everyone. Thanks very much. Take care, and may the force, as always, be with you.
Thanks.